Good evening. Please could I welcome everyone in this meeting to the Winchester Town Forum taking place from the Walton Suite, Winchester Guildhall. The time is 6:30 p.m. My name is Councillor Mike Crask, chairperson of this meeting. This meeting is being live streamed and recorded to the council's YouTube channel. Subtitles are available and advice on how to turn this on is set out on our website. If you're joining us online, please turn on your camera and microphones off until your item. Can everyone please ensure mobile phones are on silent? Please can I remind members to use their microphones and speak directly into them. Please do not turn away when speaking to enable your comments to be picked up on the recording of the meeting. In the unlikely event that it is necessary to evacuate the building, the fire alarm will sound. Please follow all instructions given to you by our team. Can I welcome the members of the public to the meeting this evening even. We will invite you forward when it's time for you to make your contribution. We will be finishing this evening. We won't be going into the morning. Claire, do we have any apologies, please?
Thank you, Chair. Apologies for absence received from Councillor Green. Thank you.
Thank you. Any disclosures of interest, please?
I need to declare a personal but non-prejudicial interest since I'm also a county councillor for part of the town forum area. No financial consequence, so it's a personal prejudicial interest.
Very good. Thank you, Councillor Todd. So a few chairperson's announcements this evening. A couple of sad ones to start with, unfortunately, in speaking to the passing of former colleagues. Former councillor and mayor of Winchester and leader of the council, Alan Mitchell, passed away on the 3rd of January. Mr. Mitchell had more than 30 years service as a member of the council. He was first elected in 1971 and then again in 1973 representing the St Paul's ward and then St Barnabas from 1976 until 1979 and then again from 1986 until 2006. He was re-elected again in 2008 before retiring in 2012. Alan was mayor of Winchester 1999 to 2000 and was leader of the council from 1994. Mr. Mitchell had been living in Cardiff, close to his family, and his funeral will take place there. A memorial service has been arranged on Friday the 10th of February at 12:30 p.m. at the Wesley Methodist Church in Wiek. Please contact the Mayor's Secretary for further information. Also saddened to announce that Eloise Appleby passed away last week following a fierce battle with cancer. Eloise was with the City Council for over 16 years and was responsible for a range of activities relating to community development, funding, economic development, cultural services, tourism and marketing. She led on a wide range of partnerships and projects, including small-scale capital works, and shaped much of our work in this area alongside leadership of our regulatory services. But that description of her job doesn't do her contribution full justice. It was fun to be with, creative in approach, and had a true passion for public service. To show our respects, I'd like to invite members and officers to join me in standing for a minute's silence. Thank you. In terms of other announcements, you may remember back in the September meeting Town Forum, we reviewed the grants programme. And I'm happy to announce that great progress has been made there in terms of the small grants programme. We've made available almost £6,000 out of the typical £6,000 small grant programme that has previously been running. We had imagined to extend that small grants programme into the wider grant programme, of which there's some 33,000 available, which had previously been allocated to a crowdfunding programme. That crowdfunding programme, as we'd imagined and expected, hasn't taken up that 33,000, and that speaks to the crowdfunder scheme across the whole district as well. So because of the lack of uptake of that large fund, a new project grant scheme has been developed to replace that programme, and aims to support not-for-profit organisations with the cost of running existing or new projects which help communities within the town and the wider district. This is a new programme, and the application window is open from the 1st to the 28th of February this year. Grants of up to £5,000 are available, and organisations are required to secure a minimum of 25% of the total project cost in match funding from other sources. So it's open from the 1st to the 28th of February. For the town, we'll look at a total amount of up to 33,000, with tranches of 5,000, of which 25% needs to come from the applicant. Examples of eligible activities include support the cost of running a new project or pilot project, continued delivery of an existing project, or increasing perhaps the numbers of people that you work with or work with new participants, funding to build volunteer networks, contributions to large-scale project will also be considered as part of this fundraising target. All the information about the scheme will be published on the council grants web pages, be promoted widely through networks, newsletters, and social media. We know that the current fundraising climate is challenging for organisations, and the recruitment and retention of volunteers is becoming increasingly difficult. Let's hope that organisations will make use of this funding opportunity and encouraged to speak to the grants team with any questions you have about making an application. Please do and encourage your communities with this fantastic opportunity. Also on that vein, there are grants available still for coronation parties, and the details of those are available on the website as well, alongside details of road closures for such parties with a deadline of next week. So coronation parties, get your skates on for that one because it closes next week. Final announcement with some good news is that the car boot sale will be starting back up again from Friday the 12th of February with proceeds and contributions to the All Saints Primary School. Sunday, 12th. Apologies, Sunday, February the 12th. Very much. So, with announcements concluded, we move to item 4, minutes of the previous meeting. Can I sign those meetings as a correct record, please? Agreed. Thank you very much, which moves us on to item 5 and public participation. We have one public participation today. Mr. Ian Tate, please. Good evening, Mr. Tate. You have your usual 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, for the opportunity to address the Town Forum. I'd like to speak about signage and advertising in the centre of Winchester. You may remember that I spoke at the last meeting about bus shelters, which are primarily used for advertising. I want to touch upon the BT hubs. 25 years ago, I was arguing for much better signage in the centre of Winchester for the secondary shopping locations, particularly as there was a cafe in Little Minster Street called Minstrels, run by the Case, which was struggling to get customers. They would put their advertising board on the bin next to the buttercross, and it was then removed, and it really affected their business. I've continued to push the issue of signage for independent businesses ever since. When the proposal for the resurfacing of the High Street came forward, at that stage, I was trying to argue that there should be effective signage as an integral part of the refurbishment of the High Street and later the square. But unfortunately, other than some, I feel, ineffective finger posts, that never happened. I raised concerns about the BID's A board, which was there to replace Independent's A boards. And then in the end, they got rid of the A board and they put those 3 fixed signs, which I think are utterly ineffective, and many people may not even realise that they're there. Out of the blue come the 5 new planning applications for the BT hubs, which are effectively advertising. We already have the county council totems, which are 2.5 metres high against the 2.98 metres for the hubs. The totems, I don't think, had any planning permission. There's one outside of the Guildhall. It's got a map on there and not much more. So I think street furniture, effective street furniture, has already been proved. It's the shape and format. There used to be a council-owned information point outside the back door of M&S. Didn't have planning permission, never really achieved the purpose, and has been removed. The county council totems, which I raised issues at the time, not about them being there, but about the way they were damaging the high street, and thankfully they sorted out the paving stones. But there's one outside the Westgate Museum and Kingsgate Arch, so very sensitive locations. So what I would ask, hopefully, that there is a chance for the council to engage with BT to make absolutely good use of 21st century technology, which the totems aren't. And so I know some members here are members of the planning committee and comment on that, but I think as a more general principle, I hope that the town forum may be able to look at those, the principle behind the totems and the BT hubs, and make good use of those. So many thanks for the opportunity to address you.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Tate. And I actually do appreciate you bringing this matter to the forum. We are limited, I think, in terms of what we can speak about in terms of planning applications, because we're restricted in some degree by a constitution. But is anybody wishing to make a comment? Say restricted with certain members on the planning committee. Councillor Lurney.
Thank you. Street furniture is an issue. Obviously, it has its purposes. Much of it is very useful. We all appreciate the need, for example, for benches and other similar items of furniture for people who need to wait or take a rest. But other items of street furniture are frankly just ugly and unnecessary. And I'm afraid I feel that the BT hubs fall, and I'm speaking not as a member of planning committee, fall firmly into that category. I've had some interesting experiences with people with reduced mobility or limited sight as they try and negotiate the streets of Winchester. You know, and every piece of street furniture we put in the way makes their life a bit harder. And I think that is a consideration, and it is one of the reasons why I have actually supported the removal of A boards in the past, which tend to be put in random positions. A lot of our residents with limited eyesight, for example, are familiar with where most of the street furniture is, and in fact some of it they actually use to help them navigate around. But where A boards are just put out into the street without consideration, then I think that's a real problem. I appreciate what Mr. Tate's saying, and certainly if we are forced to have the boards, then I would hope that we can, as he says, make use, at least some use of them for some useful purpose, but I still think there'll be horrendous blots on our council landscape.
Thank you. Councillor Radcliffe.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. It was only to add that those of us who are ward councillors for the wards where these proposed hideous new BT billboards would be put, at least those of us who are not on the planning committee, have already requested that it be referred to the full committee so that the arguments against the billboards can be made, the discussion can be had. My understanding is that the connectivity objective can be achieved with a much smaller installation, and the attachment of these big, bright, garish lit advertising billboards is purely a money exercise on the part of the committee, but that's a discussion.
Very good, thank you. And Councillor Reach?
Thank you, Chair. Just to add to Councillor Radcliffe's comments, I also asked that the applications be considered by the Planning Committee. To me, it seems difficult to see how it would be consistent with planning policy, in particular as well around accessibility and Equality Act, as one of those boards would take up considerable width of the high street, particularly the one that's proposed to be placed outside the Vodafone shop halfway up the high street. So just to say that it should rightfully be considered by the Planning Committee, but to see how it would be consistent with the stated planning.
Thank you. And Councillor Westwood?
Thank you, Chair. As a member of the Planning Committee, then I won't speak about the actual planning consents and so on for the BT boards, but what I will talk about is street clutter. So as Chair of the Winchester Walking Strategy Group, one of my members is a blind member, and at our last meeting we had a good conversation with the gentleman about the difficulty of navigating the streets in the city. Certainly on the way to my meeting, which was in one of the offices here, he did walk through some of the market stores and collected some clothes on his head on the way through and had to be rescued. My point is that we need to be really careful in the way that we allow street clutter to accumulate, and if anything we should be looking to reduce it, because not all of our society and members can easily navigate the stuff that's already there, so we need to be very careful.
Thank you. And Councillor Edwards?
Thank you, Chair. Just on the matter of A boards and temporary signage of that kind, I completely agree with what Councillor Burney and Councillor Westwood have said. I too have had representations by partially sighted and frail elderly people find their right of way blocked dangerously. My understanding is that A boards are actually licensed by Hampshire County Council as the high authority, and I have contacted our local public area today and asked him to raise the matter. It seems that there is a mushrooming of scarce pounds. Sure that it's not taken advantage of.
Thank you. And Councillor Thompson?
Thank you very much, Chair. I just wanted to pick up on a few comments that Mr. Tate raised around the structures that the bid had put. I'm now a member of the happy to raise, particularly those businesses off the high street and in without being able to advertise, potentially lose business. I'm happy to take that for discussion with the bid, whether we can make.
Very good. Well, thank you, Mr. Tate, for raising that. I think it provoked some very good discussion. I'm pleased to see that the members have been active and thinking through the consequences of this. So thank you, members, for your contributions there. And indeed, I think it leads us quite nicely into item 6, which is the local design codes presentation from Mr. Fox.
Good evening, everybody, and thank you for inviting me along to talk. Tonight I'm going to go through a presentation. I'm going to go through it at a fairly rapid pace. You've got it in advance and happy to answer questions. There is one big caveat that I'm a town planner with 28 years experience. I'm not an urban designer, but I have got a passion for urban design. So it's a kind of small caveat if I can. Okay, so let's start at the top. So okay, let's start at the top. So in terms of the government guidance, you'll all be familiar with the NPPF about achieving well-designed places. That's actually been strengthened in the proposed changes to the NPPF that they're consulting on at the moment. We've got basically the planning practice guides that has various tools, including the National Model Design Code, which is a very good document and available to download. The Levelling Up and Regeneration Bill basically places a key emphasis on producing local design codes, and in fact Michael Gove's written to all local authorities and encouraged them to prepare local design codes. So basically, like I say, to sum up, there is an emphasis on well-designed places and the issue of beauty, which obviously can be debatable, and the preparation of local design codes. So what does the National Design Code cover? Well, it covers well-designed places, and there's a kind of a wheel that's included in that makes up all the different elements of well-designed places. And it's a kind of circular wheel that obviously you've got to make sure that you address all of those points, not just one of them. So in terms of Winchester, we're starting with a good foot because obviously we've got our high quality places SPD, which is a supplementary planning document. We've got conservation area appraisals, admittedly some of those are a bit long in the tooth. And we've got neighbourhood and village design statements. And we've got local area design statements and local design codes. And we've also got master plans for obviously the MDAs. So in terms of the vision for Winchester, that identified 15 neighbourhood character areas within Winchester, which you'll be very familiar with, and identified that obviously Winchester itself is made up of a number of different character areas, and they've all got different characteristics and obviously different things within those areas. So in the Reg 18 local plan, we created various hooks in the plan to do more work at what we call the granular level. And we undertook a specific event during the Reg 18 consultation on raising the bar on design, which I know some of you were able to join. If you weren't able to join, the recordings on the new website. I encourage you to have a listen to it. We've got a new topic in the Reg 18 plan called High Quality Well-Designed Places and Living Well. And that was based on some stakeholder workshops, which I know a number of members attended. Workshop 1 was the key stakeholders, which we went through the design policies and said basically which ones to keep, delete or amend. And the second workshop, we rolled our sleeves up and got some plans out of Winchester town and got our drawing pens out and started drawing on what improvements could be made. And then we repeated that exercise in the market towns and rural villages, and that information fed in directly into the Reg 18 local plan. The workshop report, the outcomes are in the Reg 18 local plan, and that identified from the workshop 5 what we're calling opportunity areas. And they are the Broadway, Westgate, Station Area, Bar End and North Walls. Now that's not saying that there could be other areas, that is basically the starting point in terms of the feedback that we got from those workshops. And here's some examples of obviously the feedback that we got from the workshops about how those areas could potentially be improved. Now you can either improve those areas through doing more work at a granular level or obviously at the planning application stage. So I'll just kind of whiz through those, familiar with those. Now the key essential part is that design is a collaborative process. It's only going to work if it is collaborative. And it's about knowledge sharing, it's about multidisciplinary, about bringing all those disciplines together, whether or not that's landscape, ecology, highway engineers, but also it's building on local knowledge and expertise. And you need to bring all those together to obviously create a collaborative process. So what is the difference between a design code and design guide? So I've put it in their definition, I won't read them out, but basically a design code sets out more kind of design requirements. So it basically sets out the parameters for what you want to achieve. So it's more specific than guide itself. And in terms of basically what you could have in terms of local design code, you could have one local authority wide, you could have it on development sites, you could have it defined within the local authority area for allocated sites, you could have it on area or specific issues. So there's flexibility within the kind of government guidance, exactly how you could go about it. So what's the actual design coding process? Similar to a master plan, you need to undertake an analysis of the area. In other words, you're looking at how the area actually works, what works, what doesn't work, what informs the area, how people travel through the area, and And more importantly, you need to create a vision for how that area needs to improve. And that vision is really important. And we picked up on the master plan training event on Tuesday night about put yourself in the shoes of somebody who's looking at an area, whether or not that's a disabled person or an able-bodied person. Then you develop some coding, which are design parameters, setting the area wide or general policies. So in terms of design parameters, you need to make sure it's very visual and very concise, and obviously relevant to the context. So obviously you flex and adapt the design code according to the area. You could have numeric things, so you want to be as kind of as precise as possible where you can, and include clear language about how you should interpret that design code. But also, we're living in changing times with obviously the climate emergency. You've got to allow a degree of creativity to be able to come into the area, because clearly house designs, things that we're designing now, will change over the future. So in terms of the context and character, that can be informed by character studies, kind of an architectural or heritage analysis of the site, historic character, a landscape assessment for a wider area, and looking at obviously the climate, the orientation of buildings, how they function, how they kind of heat loss, etc. And also obviously the heritage assets. So you bring all those things together to look at the kind of context. In terms of the built form, you want to look obviously how the built form is there at the moment in terms of what density is there, how efficient of land use is there, what type of materials are used there. And what we want to do is draw on local distinctiveness to obviously create a character that's unique to that area. In terms of movement, we've got the City of Winchester movement strategy. We want to look at connectivity. How do people actually walk across to and from the site? How do people use it for active travel? So in other words, how do they walk? How do they cycle through the area? Where are the nearest public transport connections? Where do people park? Where is the landscaping? And where is the cycling and storage areas? So all of those areas you put together under the movement. Natural environment, obviously very important in terms of obviously what are the green infrastructure standards. So what are the blue areas, what are the green areas? So blue areas obviously are the rivers and waterways, and green areas are obviously nature areas. And looking at drainage, obviously the sustainable drainage system, and more importantly, obviously biodiversity net gain. What improvements can be made to the area to obviously meet biodiversity net gain? The public spaces, how the public space is used, and obviously we had a really good conversation there about obviously how people move along the high street and obviously avoid obstacles. But what is the ratio? In other words, how is the built form obviously interacting with the space? How tall are the buildings? How short are the buildings? How much space have you got in between? Where do people actually interact? And security, obviously that's natural surveillance, but also at night time. So how do people move through and safely through the site? How is the site actually managed? So who manages the area? Is it an area managed by the council? Is it public? How do you look at obviously looking at the temperature rises? So we talked in the Reg 18 local plan about tree planting, about shading and overlooking. Where do people kind of gather and to do their leisure and play? And is there opportunities perhaps for kind of growing food or engagement? And here are a number of success factors. I won't go through all of them in terms of obviously achieving design quality. And the main thing is obviously centering around consultation and meaningful engagement. So what are the next steps? So there's a clear expectation from Michael Gove that local authorities need to start work on preparing local design codes. These will take time and resources to prepare. Ultimately, my team are leading on the local plan, and this is obviously one element of it. We need to start somewhere in Winchester, so where should we start? We want to lead by example and understand how you can go about producing a local design code, because this will be different for obviously where we've gone before. Now, there's been a couple of pilots the local government's done, which have brought out some interesting results, but they will be resource intensive in terms of obviously bringing that forward. Village design statements are produced by obviously parish councils and town councils. How do we get those to pivot across to local design codes? What's involved in them? Some of the latest VDSs have been very good at analysing the areas. So what do we need to do extra to convert them over to local design codes? So the proposition is, we've got Andy von Bransky, who is advising the council at the moment. Andy actually, when he was working for the department, wrote the National Model Design Code. And the proposition is that he could act as a critical friend to oversee a preparation of a local design code. Now, the advantages of that, he's got a very wealth of experience in terms of helping local authorities out to do this. Now, it does come at a cost, but the idea is to basically see how we could share that cost with possibly the Town Forum, the City of Winchester Trust and the City Council. And the key thing is the question for the Town Forum tonight, whether or not you want to discuss it tonight or your planning subgroup, is where should we start? We've had discussions with the City of Winchester Trust about their views about where to start. Do you start in the middle, which obviously has got a lot of things happening in terms of CWR? Do you start on the edge? But the main thing is where you start, it's got to have some degree of change, either basically on the horizon in the short term and to look at it more holistically. So it's not just about a development parcel, it's about basically how that place looks. So for example, obviously, is it a key radial route into the city centre? Is it an area basically around the leisure centre? But I'm happy to take questions. But the thing is, we've got to start somewhere. And like I say, there's a clear expectation that we've got to start this journey. It's going to be a learning experience for all of us. But I think with Andy's help, it could be really beneficial because we could learn with local communities' support and obviously hopefully the Town Forum support to produce a local design code. And then I think we'll be in a better place to obviously advise village and town councils how they can go about producing theirs. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fox. I do want to open up, obviously, to members' questions, but I do want to say that for me, there's only one word for your work, Mr. Fox, and that's fantastic. As you say, you bring an enormous amount of expertise to the role. And just for context, 4 years ago, I campaigned for investment and development of the planning department, and I did not imagine the condition that we would be in years later. It's fantastic what you've done with the local plan, the Reg 18, obviously supported by the team and the cabinet members, but your expertise, I think, has been invaluable in creating a fantastic Reg 18 local plan. The way that you built on the vision for Winchester with the work with Bourne and Summers, taking their approach to engagement, and the way that you then won awards for the council through that engagement process, the way you created workshops to engage developers, architects, residents, the City of Winchester Trust, building strong collaborative relationships with the Trust and with this forum group. As I say, fantastic work that you've been doing, and I will say more later as well, but in the work you've done to ensure we've got hooks in the local plan, specifically for design codes, almost preempting what the Secretary of State has said, which is we should start doing design codes. I think you should be thanked for. And we've just done the Reg 18 local plan, and now you're diving straight into those design codes. So you're not stopping for breath, you're charging straight on. And it is very much what do we do in terms of design codes. And as you say, you brought in expertise, the former, and Andy, who formerly worked at the Levelling Up Housing and Communities Department, and was part of that concept of the design codes. So the ability to collaborate with him and the proposition to collaborate further with the City of Winchester Trust, I think is a real fantastic opportunity for us to seize upon. So just want to give a bit of context for the other members who've had just some of the work that you have been doing and the opportunity we've got now to really push forward to get into these design codes. But I'm sure you've got questions about design codes and how we move forward with them. So questions, I think Councillor Todd, you were first up, I think.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned village design statements, but we've also, over the years, done quite a few in the city. So we've got in 2007-8, I think 2006 we did Chilbolton Avenue local area design statement. I think West Full Flood and how it's described Westfall Flood and Oram Zaba was in 2007, St Barnabas in 2007, Sleepers Hill in 2007 as well, and then St Giles's Hill in 2020, I think quite recently. So I just wondered, and I think certainly if I know from, if we want to talk about change, if you use SIL as a quick indicator of change, there has been more change in Chilbolton Avenue than in the rest of the city, probably. Now, it may be, frankly, now too late in terms of setting a design code, but we're starting to see similar pressures in other parts of the city. Sleepers Hill is one of them. So I just wondered, do we have a sense of where we're expecting change to happen? We have a sense of that, particularly the assumptions on densification. And secondly, is there grounds for taking the design statements we already have, updating them, and perhaps looking at how we do residential areas? Because I think there's a feeling that we've underplanned how change has happened in places like Chilbolton Avenue, Dean Lane, and I think are worried that we may see a similar picture in other parts of the city like Sleepers Hill.
Thank you, Councillor. I think it's a really good question. Where do you start, and how much do you chew off? Because we've got to start somewhere. Clearly, we've got those local design codes, which Chilbolton one I'm very familiar with. St Giles Hill one was more of a recent one, which I think is a very good example of the way they went about it. I think it's trying to think about local design codes in terms of it's not just residential, it's about places. And I think it all comes back to well-designed places. So it's not only have we got something happening, but what about the space and how does it interact? So if you think about a road, what opportunities are there perhaps to put cycleway in, put trees in? It's much bigger than basically residential.
To put it mildly, that is the discussion that should have been had in Chilbolton Avenue and wasn't. The road in its current form is completely unsuited for how it's changed as a result of the quadrupling, quintupling, 10 times over increase in population in that road. The planning that was done to look at connectivity from those new developments being put in, each time a house came out and 12 went in, was shockingly bad. And there was no integrated view, no joined up approach. I fear it may be too late for Chilbolton Avenue to fix the problems that have been made by not having that integrated view. But I do worry that we will see the same thing again in other areas of the city where we expect densification. And as you rightly say, it isn't about the design of the houses, which I don't want to particularly get into. It's all about the other stuff that you talked about, which we got wrong and have still not sorted out in Chilbolton Avenue. So I'm just trying to understand, I think when I've thought about this, my take is that densification is not something we're doing well at the moment as a city, because every time we do it, we treat it as a separate, independent little site. And we say, right, this house is out and, 12 houses are in, 10 houses are in, and all the things that we'd like to do to have a bigger view of how it would work and how connectivity would work and how the roads might need to change, and all of those questions aren't looked at and aren't handled well by our planning process. And that's just a personal view, but to me, I think I worry actually most about some new development and the densification is how it's working in our residential areas and the character of those residential and the way they work. So that's why I'm kind of asking the question.
I think if I come back to that, I think obviously at the moment we've got our high quality places SPD. That will need refreshing because it doesn't take on board the climate emergency or things like that. So I guess I'm mulling in my mind whether or not densification and how we deal with that might be better dealt with in any update to the SPD, because it's perhaps not specific to an area, although obviously it has happened in certain areas, and whether or not we need to refresh and relook about how we deal with it, because it happens, it applies across the whole district rather than the Pacific area. So that's just an idea I'm just mulling over in my head, whether or not that might be a good thing to look at as part of the refresh of the SPD. Obviously, all this comes with resources at a time when we haven't actually got an urban design officer at the moment. So, but what I'm thinking of is where does this fit? Is it a local design code, or actually is it an issue that perhaps could feel nicer in the high quality places SPD? Because I know that needs kind of refreshing, and if densification is not dealt with it adequately, perhaps that's an issue for that one that I'm just mulling over.
That's much appreciated, and perspective from and the way densification might be happening in the rest of the district will be helpful. I just know that it's something that is very much on the mind of the councillors here tonight from the town area, but I'm sure other people will have views of some questions. Sorry, probed my area.
Thank you, Councillor Ferguson.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Adrian, Mr. Fox, for such a good presentation. I'm glad we did have it in advance because you did really go through it at pace. I have three questions. One sort of related to Councillor Todd's. We obviously had, for some areas, planning frameworks. So, for example, the Winnow planning framework, which was done in 2015. I just wondered how this new emphasis on design codes fits with something like that. Secondly, a question I have is, you sort of challenge us, where do we start? Where do we start in the city? And obviously the Vision for Winchester did identify those 15 neighbourhoods with different characteristics. If we start in one area of the city, is it that if we go somewhere else, we start again? Or is it that we start and we can extend the area that we're looking at? Or is it we do all separate areas? So we have to sort of choose a running list. And then my third question, which I'm sure colleagues also would like to know the answer to, is what teeth will these design codes have when we get into a planning application in a planning meeting? Because we have had neighbourhood statements before, and they're all well and good. The community gets involved. I was actually involved with the one in full flood, but we find it has no teeth. So 3 questions, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ferguson. Yes, we have got the Winnow one, the planning framework, and I think the main thing is obviously it's similar to village design statements that they will eventually segue over to local design codes. Now it's obviously where you prioritise that in terms of obviously what we do, because we've only got so much resources. So obviously I think the question is with Winnow, if I take that as an example, is there going to be change, in the short, medium term? And if it is going to be change, is that a priority area that we need to look at? And again, ask the question, is a local design code the right tool for the job to do what we want to achieve? And that's quite a challenging question to actually think about that, but I think it's important to ask that question. Will it do what we want it to achieve? What are the problems? And I think that's quite a helpful way to trying to think of an area, to think what's not working at the moment, in terms of the guidance that we've got. What would work, and kind of, I'm a great believer of doing tables and ticks and crosses, and kind of just working out the criteria and just kind of ticking it and crossing, etc. And I always say that to people with neighbourhood plans whenever I have a discussion. Is it the right tool for the job? And I think that's what we need to do. In terms of the 15 characteristics, we're not envisioning that we'd have 15 local design codes in Winchester, because there are some areas, and if I take the area of Hyde, where there is very limited change, apart from obviously what's going to happen at the leisure centre, which appreciates in Hyde. But in Hyde itself, where the historic core is, there's no need to produce a local design code, because there's not any change on the horizon in terms of obviously the what's there, etc. in the conservation area. So I think obviously it's just being selective where you go, and hopefully giving the tools. And the main thing is, with Andy's help, what I'd like to do, and empowering obviously the City of Winchester Trust, is for local people to understand how to do this. So basically it's a kind of experience to learn from a professional about how to do it, and hopefully run with that in terms of, well, okay, we've done that for that, we can therefore apply that to that area. And finally, in terms of the teeth, the levelling up bill does indicate, the last time I saw the levelling up bill, it keeps on changing, but that local design codes would have the same weight as a local plan. So they will have teeth, basically, which is good news because obviously at the moment they're a kind of lower order document in terms of obviously where the local plan is. But like I said, I've just got to keep tabs on the Levelling Up Bill in terms of what's changed, and it just keeps changing all the time in terms of what's in it and out and things like that. But the last time I read it, it was basically, and I think that's why Michael Gove's coming from, is to produce local design codes with the local input to give them that teeth. So I think that's really positive.
Thank you, Mr. Fox. Obviously, Councillor Todd has talked about Chilbolden Avenue in the Winnell area. We have seen significant change since 2015, loss of family homes to houses of multiple occupancy, additional flats being built, also the additional accommodation of dedicated student accommodation, changeover of industrial units, and so on. So even if we just looked at that area of the city, we can see that that part is in flux. We've obviously got changes with the motorway junction that could lead to additional changes at that junction. We have a 24-hour McDonald's going in, a drive-through, a specific bugbear of my own. So even that area, you could argue, is an area of significant change going forward. I accept what you're saying is we need to know what's the right tool. I suppose the watch out for me is that if the design code has as much teeth as the local plan, does that mean that those parts of the town that have design codes are protected, and those parts of the town that don't, be a greater burden and a greater danger that they'll be subject to that densification and poor planning, even though we will have our local plan and all the policies in our local plan notwithstanding? Thank you.
Well, I would hope the proposed changes to the MPVF, which are obviously being consulted on at the moment, really does raise the bar on it, and we've got obviously the national design code here. So I'm hoping that obviously this is purely a professional point of view, that we are getting there now, that actually at long last there's acknowledgement that design makes well-designed places, makes safe places, makes people feel safe, attractive, and it kind of creates that. So I'm hoping, and that's always an emphasis of our workshop that we did during the Reg 18, is we call it raising the bar on design. Is there more things that we could do with the high quality places SPD that we didn't think about before? Because obviously that was produced of its time. It was a really good document, but obviously how can we improve that? What works, what doesn't work? And again, I think that's going through similar exercise to what we did with the Reg 18 plan, where we went through the current policies and we ticked and crossed it and we said, right, what can we do better? And I think that's the challenge that we've got, is what else can we do? But I don't think it, I hate to think that it kind of elevates one area over another. I'm a bit nervous about that, if that is the intention, because if it's got the same weight as the local plan's got good policies in there now on design. So that's positive, that we can obviously refuse things on poor quality and design. We've got the National Model Design Code, and things are changing in terms of obviously what is being refused out there in terms of the planning inspectorate. So I hope we don't create that hierarchical approach, because that's certainly not my intention to do that.
Thank you. Councillor Tippett Cooper, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you so much for this. I think you may have answered my question during your answers there, but I would sort of really drill down into it. When you said a high quality design plan, is that the Central Winchester SPD document? Is that what you're referring to?
Now that's the supplementary planning document. We've got high quality places SPD. It was in the PowerPoint slide of it, so you know what it looks like.
With the red frontage.
This one there.
Oh, no, it's not.
That
right. 2015 one.
So that covers the whole of the district supplementary planning document. So it was produced 2015. So yeah, it's on, sorry, I'm not screen sharing, I'm suddenly realising slide 4. Sorry about that. Slide 4 of the presentation. So yeah.
Fine, no, apologies then. But my question relates, I think, because a lot of people were very passionate about the Central Winchester Regeneration SPD document. And it looks like, and it sounds like from what you're saying, this is as much as anything an evolution of the sort of design elements within that document, and not in any way, shape or form meant to be a you know, a dismissal of it. It's simply evolution, and that would be really reassuring, I think, to a lot of people. Just to confirm, that's the first question. And the second thing is, I think, what would be the output from this process? Would it be a single design code document like the high quality places document, the central CWR SPD, or will it be a pilot design code for a particular project? What's the sort of desired output?
Thank you. Yeah, so it's in no way meant to diminish, obviously, the excellent work on the CWR SPD. And like I say, that raised the bar from where we were. And we want to keep on raising that bar really from where we are. And obviously we're not looking to relook at CWR because that's got a supplementary planning document itself. So this is an addition to that. In terms of the output, whether or not you call it a pilot area or a trial area or test it, I think a pilot area, people might think, well, what is a pilot area? I think the main challenge is where do you start in a complex area such as Winchester to start the process? Because if you don't start, you're never going to do anything. And you've got to be brave, I think, to suddenly say, right, okay, we're going to do this and we're going to try it in this area. And we're going to learn, and we might make mistakes on the way. But hopefully that learning experience and bringing the community with us, and for example, the City of Winchester Trust with us, hopefully can empower people to do more of it. The pilots that are run by the government at the moment have certainly unearthed that it is challenging to do this. If you did this, I think you're going to need the buy-in certainly of some large organisations in Winchester. So for example, the large architectural firms come to the table as well. And I think there's benefit in that in terms of obviously their kudos in terms of being involved in design code, because there's not many of them around in terms of the pilots. There's a handful around, I think there's 12 that have basically been done by with assistance from the government. There might be some further round of funding from central government in terms of second rounds of design code pilots, so it's certainly worth looking out for that. But it's really tapping into Andy's expertise, really, and just trying an area. And that's why I think you possibly want to go for an area that's not too complicated. It's not got things going on in it. So, for example, central Winchester, kind of around central Winchester, we've got things going on. We've got station approach. Not to undermine that, but to think of another area that basically we could go for and we could test it.
Thank you. I've got a question, but I'll go to Councillor Scott first. Thank you.
Sort of coming on the back of Councillor Todd's Chilbolton Avenue, I agreed heartily what he was saying. He's spent a number of years on planning, and quite often when there was a planning application came about Chilbolton Avenue, and all the viability tests that used to be mentioned at that, it just didn't stack up. That said, so I'm coming from a Stanwell point of view. The best part of Stanwell celebrated 100 years built, and it was designed really well as a village of once and boards. If those who designed that now looked at Stanwell now, they would have nightmares what I'm saying about HMOs. Not that it's not welcome. We welcome students, and it's over planned for. We've lost a substantial bit of open space recently because of the pressures of housing. We've lost community facilities, no pubs anymore. So the sense of community is starting to wane. Sense of community spirit. The master plan now, which we had, the Stanwell Plan, has lots of good points that came out of that. That needs refreshing. So we have to be very mindful, members, when we pick an area. It's not to sort of come back on some fantastic presentation, and I gave you good credit last time for documentation, really easy to read. We have to be really careful, because yesteryear's consequences and decisions were made, and then suddenly other decisions come over, and you're left with something which actually wanted, no one desired, and no one planned for. We have to make sure if we're going to see this design work in places, in diversity, open space, highways, footpaths and whatever we're putting in, going to have a long duration of owning it as a council, rather than just sort of put a little bit of thinking to it and no one takes ownership and no one sees it through for the future generations. That's the danger if like say that Stanworth's moment in time is about not being looked after for a substantial amount of years to what it was originally thought and built in a fantastic way. That's not to derive my community. I'm passionate and love my community very well. I see at the moment it's in a good position.
That's really helpful point. Thank you, Councillor. I think the longevity of it and how you deal with that is one of those challenges, because obviously the world does change, technology changes, the way we move and whatever. You know, we've got e-bikes, e-scooters maybe on the horizon. So that's one of the challenges of the, obviously how do you plan that in a local design code to be resilient to the future? I'm afraid I don't know all the answers to that, because I'm not a kind of qualified urban designer, but I think it's a key thing that we're going to have to grapple with, how far it can go, and is again the local design code the right thing to do to address those issues that obviously you eloquently outlined, or is it another tool that we need? And I think they're interesting questions that I think we need to kind of consider further in terms of obviously how we take things forward. But yeah, the longevity of it and dealing with changes in the way that we move, changes in technology, changes in building form, etc., are all key issues that I don't think have been fully explored, if I'm honest, by what's there. And I think it's going to be basically an evolutionary process that's going to happen. And we may not get it right first time. You know, we're going to have to learn, because, like I say, there's probably 12 out there. You know, in the whole of the country, there's not many out there.
Another point, obviously, on the rationale of people coming to the workshop, and it would be interesting to know, perhaps you do know, the percentage that come from, we would class the old council estates, from Winnell, Hindstown, or Beak and so forth like that. How much of the sort of buy-in from the old council estates areas that came into the workshop to give their sort of opinion and their point of view about how they want their city to grow and sort of function. Because we do have some phenomenal experts and phenomenal architects, and you know, the City Trust has got some fantastic people. Sometimes it's an interesting one if you do know, perhaps you do know, don't know. It's interesting to actually try, and it's hard to engage with some of the residents in lots of engaging community.
I'm afraid I haven't got the facts and figures in terms of who's there, but I think the key thing is that those 5 areas which were identified through the workshops is not exhaustive. That's the main thing. They were identified through the workshop process. Yes, there are other areas and they are equally important, but obviously they came from the workshop, and that was the workshops were open to everybody to attend and were publicised very widely. And like I say, if you have the capacity, you could run similar workshops in other areas and probably produce very similar plans about what could be done to achieve, but it does come down to resources, unfortunately.
Thank you. One thing I'd like to have members' questions on, Mr. Fox. We've reached a point, I think, in the conversation where we are starting to see what's possible and the opportunity. To my mind, if not Winchester, with its wealth of design and architecture firms, quite frankly, where would you do in the country? Given your expertise and what you've heard, where would you recommend we start as an area across the town?
I think obviously the people around this room know Winchester a lot better than me in terms of obviously living here a lot longer. I think in terms of obviously how people interact and people's first impressions, there has been change at kind of the Bar End area in terms of obviously the fantastic sports and leisure facility. There is going to be further change there with the depot site. But obviously that ultimately is a key radial route into the city centre that is people's first impressions of Winchester. A fantastic cathedral city. What is your impression as you come past there? Yes, you see the leisure centre. Yes, you go, wow, fantastic. You're confronted with a roundabout. Then you go up there and then you've got a car showroom, etc. But is that really, you know, kind of a great impression that you want of a, you know, fantastic cathedral city in terms of, you know, that there's going to be some change there and a local design code can help and can support redevelopment of the site. It's certainly not stifling anything to do with that. And to bring those people, you know, into a cathedral city in a positive way, I think could be advantageous. But that's just my personal view, is that if you've got to start somewhere, think about how people actually approach Winchester Town. Certainly don't start with the centre, because there's far too many things going on in terms of regeneration projects, far too complicated. I would start at the edge, and I think it comes back to a jigsaw puzzle. Where do you actually start? You start usually around the edge, and then you work towards the middle. Basically, my father loves jigsaw puzzles, so watching quite a lot, but that's just my personal suggestion, but I'm open for suggestions.
Thank you. Councillor Edwards.
Thank you, Chair. I have to confess I'm struggling a bit here, although I'm really interested in what's trying to be achieved. Struggling partly because there are so many different documents and statements and codes and plans, and how they knit together is a complicated jigsaw, as I'm sure. But I think it's more than that. I'm not sure, and I really hope you could clarify for me what we're trying to get out of doing a pilot, doing the first one. Is it that we want to know how we go about the process of developing a design code? Or is it that we work out something in some ways, typical bit of our city, which starts to fill in some of the background that we would use if we were doing one in an adjacent part of the city? If it's the latter, that worries me a bit, because where you start might start to actually determine what the whole of the city code would end up saying. And we've talked a bit about, well, quite a lot about density and permeability and transport, as Councillor Todd was saying earlier, movement being, should be behind our principles. And that naturally, to me, seems to be something you have to look at holistically. Start doing different transport movement solutions in different, looking, you know, grassroots rather than upwards. I don't quite see how that's going to work. And finally, you talked about how you like tick boxes to be able to see what's going to work and what isn't. And you talked about a few things that a pilot area needed to have, like, you know, not be too complex, but something's going to happen there. I just wondered if you had a longer, a more granular list of tick boxes that would enable us to determine what we were looking at. I'm sorry if that was rather a disjointed ramble, but I hope you picked something out of it.
Thank you, Councillor. I do appreciate that it's complicated with the amount of documents we've got, and I think obviously that's just the stage we're at in terms of obviously the local plan, and these documents obviously falling behind the local plan, and obviously what we're trying to obviously achieve. I think the main thing is, how do you go about it? And I think that's a learning experience that I'd want to participate in, to learn how you can do it. What is transferable to other areas? And I think that's a key part of this journey, and that's where I think Andy's help would be beneficial, because he can say, you need to concentrate on this, don't worry about that, concentrate on this, and actually that's too much information for this, that's not perhaps the right tool. And I think that's inevitably extremely important to basically learn from this and see what's transferable and see what's transferable for other areas in terms of villages as well, not forgetting the villages and market towns. I totally agree in terms of movement. It's essential you know how an area kind of interacts with the whole area, particularly obviously when the key radio I was talking about. So you've got to take that standpoint. But what we don't want to do is produce a master plan for the whole of the city or a neighbourhood plan. That's far too complicated. But you've got to understand how it moves. But could this be a way of actually moving forward some of the ideas in the City of Winchester movement strategy at a more granular level and go, well, how's that actually going to work in that area? What's that area actually going to achieve? And how does that complement the City of Winchester movement strategy? So you have that as alongside it, your ideas about obviously the climate emergency, you've got the City of Winchester movement strategy. So you had those tools in your toolkit and you're testing it to see what you can bring forward. And in terms of the tick box, I haven't got a list. I'm afraid I like tick box, I'm a kind of planner, etc. But that's where I think Andy's expertise will help, because these are the things that I've identified in terms of, I think it's basically trying to think of local design codes more holistically, that it's not just design, it's basically how the places work, how the places feel, what is a well-designed place, and that's not just building architecture and setbacks and things like that, it's much, much wider. So, and I think the National Design Code, if you haven't looked at it, I'm looking at page 11 here, goes through a number of criteria here. So I'd kind of use that as a steer really, but and some of the things in my presentation where it talks about basically identifying movement, land ownership, you go through those in a systematic way. So it's similar to my tick box in terms of a systematic way you'd go through those.
Thank you. There's quite a few councillors still wishing to talk, and we're getting through time quite rapidly. I'm very keen that the Town Forum supports Mr. Fox and his work on design codes and his collaboration with the City of Winchester Trust, and the ability to, as I say, leverage the expertise we've got in the city. I really want to bring the support of the Town Forum to that group, and be part of a three-way party effectively between the Town Forum, the Council and the City of Winchester Trust, and by extension across all those three, all residents across the town. And pick up on the recommendation of the Bar End area. So I'd like to really offer that as a route forward. I'm very keen that comments from the members respond to that proposition. So if you could consider that as you provide your comments, I'd appreciate that very much. Councillor Batho, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Fox. My question was regarding timescale. We have a design code that has not been undertaken, as you say, many times before in the country. How long do you think it would take us to do the first of those design codes? And then, given that there are another 14 areas that are currently defined in that vision document, how long would it take to roll out across the whole of the Town Forum area? My second question was actually along the lines of Councillor Edwards, picking up on your tick list. Clearly, if we aren't going to go with the Bar End area, needing to sort of make a decision about which, so you know, what criteria should we be applying to make that judgment? And despite Councillor Crask's request, my initial comment then was going to be about St Barnabas, because it is an entry to the city from the north. It's had significant development and indeed is one of the highest level of sill contributors to the district. It has a complex combination not only of domestic housing but commercial property with the Waitrose and Aldi shopping in the Stony Lane area, which would give quite a range of aspects within that design code. There's also significant pressure on its green spaces. It's also adjacent to Kings Barton and an MDA, and also to open spaces and Littleton, which has just produced its own village design statement. So I think there's a number of aspects that might be beneficial in using that as an area. Sorry, Mr. Councillor Crask. Thank you.
In terms of timescales, clearly, obviously, we've not done one before. We need to think how we can resource that too. Andy's advised us it would be between 9 and 12 months to do one on this journey. Just to reiterate, I'm not suggesting that we need design codes for the 15 areas in the vision for Winchester. You don't need to do design codes for the whole 15 areas, but obviously there's some that you would want to focus on. And obviously in terms of Barnabas, great points, but it's like, where do we start? And whether or not we're going to crack this one tonight, or whether or not the Town Forum want to go away and have a think about it. Because Andy's time, I must say, doesn't come free. We've got to pay for him. Hence why Councillor Crash is saying obviously a three-way split. So we've got to be prudent where we're going to spend our money and what we're going to get out of it. But yes, you're making valid points in terms of obviously an area, but I think the key thing is the local design code the right tool for a particular area? And we may need some experience from Andy, who is a qualified urban designer, to obviously work that out. But yeah, hope that helps.
Very good, thank you. I'm going to ask if we can finish in the next 5 minutes, but I think Councillor Westwood, please.
Thank you, Chair. So I've got 5 minutes. Fantastic. Just to be clear, I've got one question of clarification, Mr. Fox, and then I'd like to answer your point if perhaps another area of the city that we can consider. Clarification, I was in here a couple of days ago talking about master plans, and the statement was made there that the view of the person presenting master plan should really then the design code later, and that we had little. What did your view on that before?
I must admit, well, I was at the training myself, and I think I actually disagree with that in terms of the approach, because there is a lot of things in a master plan that's very similar to a local design code in terms of you are exactly the way the master plan is looking at frontages, how people work, how people move through it, connectivity, but it's at a more granular level. And I personally, professionally, don't think that we want a master plan for the city of Winchester. I think that's far too complicated to do in terms of the whole of the area. But I think there's very much kind of similarities between the principles of a master plan and a local design code in terms of you are looking at connections, you're looking at how people move through the spaces. So I think the principles are very similar, and local design codes are new, and it's a new way of thinking in terms of obviously they've only just come out in terms of how you want to go about them. And Andrew, obviously I respect his professional view, but obviously he's an urban designer, always done master plans, that's what he does as a living, and probably had very little experience of doing local design codes. So I would rely on Andy's experience as the author of the National Design Codes to kind of take us to that granular level. I hope that helps.
No, that's fine. That's something we need to understand and address, though, when we go down this path. So moving on then, you talked about bar end entrance to the city. I'd like to put another viewpoint on it. We've heard from Councillor Todd about what's happened up at Chilbolton Avenue. If I look further in that area, that West Hill area and Romsey Road area, see Knights Quarter has been delivered on the old police station site, and it's an utter disaster, really. So there, it's virtually impermeable. The people in there have an entrance out onto a very busy road. From there, it's downright dangerous. And that is another disaster in that sort of area. There's another development that's a lot older than that. It's side of the road, which is also gated and segregated. The area behind that is inaccessible around, so it can't be. In that area, you have the hospital. You know that there is activity certainly around the hospital site moving forwards. So we've just had the police station site redeveloped. You've got the prison there, which is a grade 2 believe, and at some stage I believe something will happen on that area there. Winchester University, you've got all the student accommodation. There is sites within the Sheila in that area, and it's adjacent to Chilbolton Avenue as well in that area. So I would suggest that if you wanted to pick an area of the city where there will be change, that is in dire need of a design code, then that whole area around the university and hospital and the prison site is absolutely a good area to start. And I would also pick up on your words around pilot. I don't like pilots. I think what we should be doing is a first phase of a delivery, phased delivery, and we pick an area where we teeth on a first phase, because pilot gives the idea that it's something that you can chuck away. This isn't. This is for real. So I would use the words a tightly scoped first phase delivery city.
So I'm glad this has got so much engagement, and we've moved into an area where people are pitching for.
Can I suggest a way forward, Chair? Can I suggest a way forward?
Please.
From what I've heard, I think there are, and also previous discussions with colleagues, I think there are 3 areas, and I think what distinguishes them from Bar End, because the problem for me with Bar End is it's been talked about as expecting change, and I don't think it is. I'm not aware of any Sheila proposals to change what's happening in the industrial estate. Yes, the county council might want to sell its park and ride, staff park and ride. The depot site will probably be mostly done and dusted by the time this work was completed, so you're not left with much, frankly, to talk about. And the risk would be that you'd end up with a sort of interaction between this and the depot project, which wouldn't be very helpful. There are discussions that need to be had about that area to do with what depot infrastructure we might need for food waste, how we sort out storage of artefacts at Chilcombe, in Chilcombe Lane, how we, what we might want to do with, I don't know, courier delivery, and do we want a delivery transfer site or other such things. But when it comes to areas which I think people look at and are thinking about, are facing change, and we know change is coming, we know there's going to be development from what we see at the moment. I don't think we think of Bar End, because I don't think there's actually that much coming that I know of. We know that the area of Romsey Road that's being talked about is an option. One option, and I'm declaring interest as a county councillor, we know that Sir John Moore Barracks and King's Barton is going to have a huge impact on Harestock and St Barnabas more generally. And we've not thought about that at all, really, in terms of what might need to change in that area. And if there is an entrance to the city where there is a lot of change, and there has been a lot of change, and it feels like we haven't quite got a grip in it, I would say there was Eastern Lane. So the suggestion might be that we take those 3 areas, and if somebody wants to throw another one into the mix, and say, can you come back to us? Maybe it'll need to be informally, because I'm not sure when the next meeting is, with a recommendation out of those 3 as to which you think would be most worthy of, would be most suitable for a study. And we can have a conversation about the exact parameters and scope, but I think it's probably one of those 3. And if somebody else wants to say something different, then please do so.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Todd. It does feel like we need to do a bit of homework to look at precisely which area. I think we've covered a lot of ground in terms of the concept of making progress. But if we can do that, if we can table this for the next meeting to look at exactly which area we move forward with, and do some work outside the meeting in the meantime to do some analysis to build the argument that we can all get behind. What we are talking about is working with Andy von Bradsky in collaboration, as I say, with the council and the City of Winchester Trust. What that involves is a contribution towards Andy's time. We're looking in the region of up to £3,000, which would come out of the vision delivery budget, is the proposition. But I think if we can table this until the next meeting in March and do some work in the interim, I think that's probably the best way forward. Apologies that we didn't get time for everybody to talk exactly through what they wanted, but I'm afraid we do need to move on. Mr. Fox, thank you, as I say, for your work. It's outstanding work, as I say. I do also want to acknowledge, without stealing your thunder or prejudging you in any way, the work you're doing with the Health and Environment Policy Committee on the SIL strategy alongside Councillor Porter. I think that's an incredible piece of work. In terms of SIL, I think previous administrations have let slip what could have been done with SIL. And the fact that you can pick that up and look at that strategically and align it to the local plan is completely appropriate, and you should be encouraged with that. And hopefully we'll hear more about that as well next time. But for now, Mr. Fox, thank you very much, because we need to move on to the exciting subject of the budget, please.
Just for clarification, I think there would be consensus to say we want to see this piece of work done in Winchester, and we're prepared to authorise £3,000 to do it. But we would like to have further conversation about exactly what area is picked. And I would suggest the three that I suggested were the three that were put up for evaluation. Is that your understanding of the meeting? Because it might be useful to just formally agree that as a group, as a committee.
I think if we could, that would be very helpful if we feel in a position to do that. If we feel as a town forum that we're able to support moving forward and support the contribution of £3,000 from the vision budget to fund Andy von Bradsky in collaboration with the council and the City Winchester Trust, and that we look at specifically what area and confirm that in the next meeting. All in favour? No? Councillor Ferguson, please.
Can I just please ask a question, Chair? If we allocate those funds in collaboration with the two other parties, to what extent are we able to influence the area that's looked at, and to what extent do we? No, I'm just trying to understand what I'm agreeing to.
So we're agreeing to moving forward to work on design codes and to pay for Andy von Bradsky's time, in collaboration with the council and the City Winchester Trust, and in collaboration with those two parties agree which is the area that we're going to work on.
Can I suggest that actually, I think I may be wrong, but I think this committee said what three areas are on the table. So I think it's reasonable to have a discussion, but, you know, I don't think, just to be absolutely clear, from my point of view, I don't think Bar End's on the table. And the three areas I suggested are the ones that I'd quite like us to agree on, unless somebody else wants to propose something else or disagrees with me. I suggested the Romsey Road area as proposed by Councillor Westford. I suggested Harestock and St Barnabas to deal with the impact, and I suggested Eastern Lane because we know there's huge change coming with the new roundabout system and everything that's going on up there, and it feels like it needs a proper look in design terms. And I think it would be wrong without you having a chance to properly think through and respond to that to make that decision now. But I think my understanding was those would probably be three areas that we'd want to look at.
So I'm not agreeing on any particular area right now, but there are three on the table, and there are options to include others for discussion.
Chairman, to simplify this and move on, because I've got a train to catch, can we agree to make the funding subject to the town forum agreeing an appropriate location at its next meeting?
That sounds very agreeable to me. Is everybody comfortable with that? So the funding is subject to agreement on the location. Thank you.
Agreed.
Agreed. Thank you very much. I know that was a very challenging conversation from a slow starting point. So thank you very much. Mr. Fox, again, thank you. So moving on to the next item on the agenda. It is indeed item 7, the Winchester Town Account Budget for 23-24 to be recommended to Cabinet, WTF 314. Councillor Learn, is this something that you're introducing?
Yes, I will. Thank you, Chairman. And I'm supported by Darren Kennedy, who did actually write the paper. So he deserves all our thanks for that. This is a difficult time for all of us. We're all very proud of our city. All of the councillors in the town forum live in the city wards and share the same streets, parks and facilities as all our residents. And we've been doing all we can to improve our open spaces, support local community organisations and provide new facilities. We have a number of improvement programmes ongoing, including sports facility improvements, new play areas, the North Walls Park Plan, and the town members have been working with officers on a number of heritage and street scene improvements that are part of district programmes as well. We do have to recognise, however, that the Winchester town is severely underfunded compared to large parishes and market towns in our district. Last year, for comparison, while the town Band D charge was £76.71, the comparable figure for Bishop's Waltham was £173.80, Benmead £171.65, New Alresford £142.97, Wickham £148.32. That's a staggering difference in the money per household that's coming in to us as an organisation. Parishes have full flexibility in their parish precepts and can raise more if local needs increase. Typically, for example, when a new community building is required. Last year, one parish council raised its precept by 94.5%. The town, however, shares the capping regime imposed on the City Council. We have very little flexibility, and as illustrated in 11.7 in the paper, we can only raise the town charge by more than this year's nationally set capping limit of 2.99% if the district council tax is raised by less. With 70% of the town expenditure being on open space and grounds maintenance, much of which is on inflation-linked contracts, the high level of inflation and CPI inflation remains above 10% even now, has moved the town finances sharply into the red. In addition, we have a number of unavoidable growth items, including the need to spend on bus shelters and tree maintenance. The Finances Working Group has been looking at this closely, and although action does need to be taken, the level of reserves we have does give us a bit of breathing space to take considered decisions over the next year, focusing in particular on the play area programme, open space and grounds maintenance, cemeteries and grants, although we will need to look at all our areas of discretionary spend and in addition revisit the way we spend community infrastructure levy. In the light of the difficult financial position, the Town Accounts Group are recommending to the Town Forum that we recommend to Cabinet that an increase in the Band D town charge of the maximum commensurate with the council tax referendum limit be made, which we expect to be around 5.5%, or put another way, it's still less than 9 pence per week per household on a Band D charge. So I don't know if Mr. Kennedy wants to add anything to that, but happy to take questions and comments.
I think that covers all the main points very well. I think I'd just flag in terms of the reserve that obviously as Councillor Lerney has said, the reserve balances at the moment do give some flexibility, but just to highlight that the projections in Appendix 1 do take us below the financial strategy target of 10% during 23-24, but as also mentioned, there are a number of areas of review within section 11.8, some significant areas of review within that, which are expected to take place during this calendar year. And that review programme is expected to deliver the savings required to replenish that earmarked reserve and put together put the town on a more even financial footing over the medium term.
Very, very good. Thank you, Mr. Kennedy. So members, we are recommended to do three things. One, to agree the draft budget for 23-24. Consider the council tax preset for the town area, which we wish to recommend to Cabinet, and then approve the release of £50,000 from the town SIL as a contribution to the KGV Park Plan Improvement Project. So comments, questions? Questions, please, members. Councillor Scott.
Chair, I wholeheartedly agree with you, Councillor Lerney. We've been well underfunded for many years in respect of the other parish councils. And my point I would make when this recommendation goes to Cabinet is that we have a really good comms on this, because the average Joe out there may not understand why and what we have to do, because as we know, because obviously we see our lines of budget, what we pay for, and what's our criteria as a town forum we do. But I do think, you know, we need to make sure the residents know reasons why we're doing that. Basically, the services were provided, which is a little bit different in a parish council. She's got quite good funding, to be honest. So I just think if we can get the comms right, I think that will go a long way to, you know, get residents to realise why we're doing it.
Thank you, Councillor Scott.
Any questions, members? Councillor Ferguson.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair, and thanks, Councillor Lerney and Mr. Kennedy. I just wondered, Darren, whether you could, just for clarity, give a sense of, even with the additional precept that we'll be able to raise, to what extent there'll still be a shortfall given the additional costs that the town account is being asked to bear next year, because there are an uplift in the number of costs to do with tree works, the bus shelters, etc. And we obviously have inflationary pressures. So even with the additionality of the precept, there is still going to be a gap, as I understand it. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. We do focus significantly on the reserve position with the Winchester Town because of the significant one-off expenditure. So in particular with the play area programme, which is set over a number of years. And so therefore we set the, we aim to maintain the reserve balance with that in mind. And so therefore the reserve balance can appear significant in any particular years, as it does at the moment. But that's because some of those play area programmes, multiple, are happening within that year. So focusing on the reserve position, it does show a very tight position for 23-24, even with the increase in precept. So that reserve position is showing a closing forecast of just over £56,000 for 23-24, which is roughly half of the 10% strategy target. There is a number of one-off capital expenditure items coming from the play area refurbishment programme in 23-24, which is causing a significant demand and which was planned for in previous budget settings. Very much the pressures that we're seeing now on the revenue budget have all pretty much all come from the rise in inflation and some of the increases in budget caused by the bus shelter maintenance and additional tree maintenance that have come forward. So yes, it is a very tight position showing currently for 23-24.
Councillor Radcliffe, please.
Thank you very much. Just to agree very much with Councillor Scott's comments earlier, I would hope that we can emphasise in communications to our residents how nonsensical the system is, the system in which we are unfortunately trapped, in which parish councils are able to meet the needs of their residents by raising the necessary funds. And we are not. You know, the expression of postcode lottery is probably overused in the media, but that is exactly what this is. And if you happen to live in Winchester town, then unfortunately the requirements of the town residents cannot be as easily met as is the case for those of our residents that live in the parishes. So I know there's no easy answer to this. In the context of operating under these constraints, I think officers have done a terrific job. I thank them for their work on these papers. I fully support the approach that Councillor Lerney has set out, and it is a responsible, measured approach that I
Well, Councillor Lerney, Mr. Kennedy, you're doing very well in terms of there's no questions. We've moved almost to debate, I think. Councillor Westwood, have we got a question, please?
I do, thank you, Chair. Yes. When I look at the play area refurbishment in 2024, there's a very large number, 4,000. Are you looking at some level of rephasing of some of that in your review so that you can spread that load over?
I think the review is intended to be a full refresh of the programme. So obviously rephasing is certainly an option. And in terms of the pressures on the budget, there's always that option available in terms of rephasing. So in terms of the budget position, while there are pressures certainly on 23-24, there are options, particularly in terms of the one-off expenditure, that if it really came down to it, then rephasing is one possible option. But I think the review is intended to be broader than just looking at rephasing.
Yeah, if I can add to that, a number of the play area works scheduled for this year have actually been delayed for quite a while. So those have been building up, which is why we've kind of ended up with a rather lumpy profile. And certainly while we'll be looking at the play area programme as a whole, in terms of reprofiling it, having a look at paring it down in some shape or form, then we will still be meeting our existing commitments. You know, for example, in North Walls, we've made quite a lot of promises to local residents, and they've been waiting for that play area to be redone for quite a long time. Similarly, we've already started some of the works in Abbey Gardens, and those will be progressing as soon as the weather improves, as I understand it.
Thank you. Can't see any more questions. Do we have any debate on this paper at all? Councillor Ferguson.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to thank Mr. Kennedy for the work that's gone into this. And despite the pressures, when you look at this budget, what it shows is what good value the town forum precept is for all the things that the town actually covers. The play areas are something we're incredibly proud of. They are a free facility. They are available to all. And we know that they are well used. And the programme for their refurbishment and maintaining them that Town Forum put in place some years ago has been very, very effective. And so even when we do the review, I hope that we'll be looking to maintain them in the same standard that we always have. It may be that there are options whereby we don't do a full refurbishment, as in rip everything out, start again. Maybe there are elements which will also help us with our carbon ambitions within the climate emergencies that we can retain. I think when we had our superb tree officer, Ivan, whose surname I've forgotten at this point, came and talked to us about the trees, that we all supported the additional money for the tree works because they are also very important to the town and the health and well-being, or sense of well-being of residents. But it's really just to say, despite difficult times, we still have a budget that we can work within. We are doing that sensible review, so we're not making snap decisions in a number of areas. And I would like to thank Mr. Kennedy for keeping us on track with this budget.
Thank you. And Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I too would like to thank Mr Kennedy for his work on the budget and also echo what Councillor Ferguson and Councillor Lerney said in her opening remarks. I think I'm more than happy to support the budget as set out in here. I think, as Councillor Ferguson has said, work on our play area refurbishment programme is absolutely crucial. And I know I've said it before, I've said it many times over the years I've sat here. When I originally came to Winchester 16 or 17 years ago now, the play areas were one of the highlights, but I thought they were outstanding, actually, particularly in comparison to where I moved from. I think also I love the way the paper's written as well, in a very positive manner. And I think we can be really proud of the fact that although budgets are really tight and we do have challenges on the horizon, we are still moving forward with our projects. And I think that is something that we're really proud of.
Very good, thank you. I think all there is for me to do then is to really echo the comments made and the thanks for the hard work that is needed to be done in difficult circumstances, and the work that will need to be done next year in terms of the areas for review. So our thanks as a group, I think, for your work, Mr. Kennedy. I think it does overall spell out to me the importance of the town sill as a way to provide facilities, given the limitations we have on the town precept. And within that, we need to, as a group, agree the recommendations on page 41, which speak to our agreement to the budget for 23-24 and the indicative projections for the strategy period shown in Appendix 1. To consider town precept for the town area which which we agree to recommend to Cabinet, noting the requirements of the Council to keep within their overall referendum constraints. And then finally, we've spoken a lot previously about the KGV, but to approve the release of £50,000 from the town sill as a town account contribution towards the KGV Park Plan Improvement Project. Total budget was approved by Cabinet in September 2020, CAB 3360, subject to our town sill funding approval. So to those three, can I get a group agreement to those?
Chairman, we will need an actual recommendation for two, because while we have considered it today, we do actually need to make a recommendation to Cabinet, to which I would suggest the wording that that we wish to recommend a council tax precept for the town area of the maximum commensurate with the council tax referendum limit.
Very good. Thank you, Councillor Lerney. So that would be a agreement to a maximum precept commensurate with the maximum referendum limit. Do we have agreement to those 3 points?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Very good. Thank you. So that.
Apologies, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Lerney. So that brings us to the end of item 7 and on to item 8, the informal group verbal updates. I provided a briefing note which spoke to our response to the Reg 18 local plan. And then, as I say, that built on the work that Adrian, Mr. Fox spoke to earlier in terms of design codes. And as I say, there's work occurring in the Health and Environment Policy Committee around SEAL. So that's really a summary there of the work being done by the town plan account. Do we have any volunteers, the chairs of the groups, to speak to work happening in their areas, please? Councillor Radcliffe.
Thank you, Chair, and my apologies for not getting you a written summary in time for the deadline for publication. On the Parks and Recreation Informal Working Group, a few updates for information of members. Starting in North Walls River Park, surveys are being carried out. A topography survey is almost finalised. A survey of ecology across the park will take much of the rest of the year to complete. And the findings from these and other required surveys will inform the implementation of the park plan, which we've approved, of course, including the phasing and sequencing of key elements of the plan. Staying in River Park, the council has approved the installation of an upgraded temporary toilet block, which should be in place by Easter. The new block will provide much improved facilities for park users until such time as the cafe and permanent toilet block is built, which remains our medium to longer term objective. At KGV in Highcliffe, I'm pleased to say construction of the magnificent new pavilion is now underway. In addition, 14 new trees have been planted near the play area, which brings the total number of new trees planted at this site in the past year to 28, funded in part by the Forestry Commission. We'll also see work started by the end of the year on the new play area at KGV, although work there is pending the completion of the pavilion, which has to be done. On St Giles Hill, new 5-year park management plan has now been drawn up for the park at the top of the hill. The plan reflects a huge amount of work carried out by council officers over the past 6 months, including a complete tree survey with associated bat scoping and other stock-taking exercises. A draft of the new plan will be shared at the next meeting of the Town Forum, and it will be put out to public consultation over the spring. So everyone with an interest in the park, including local residents and other park users, will have a chance to comment before the plan is finalised. I'd say some work streams that are included in the new plan have already begun, especially those that fall into the category of essential maintenance and repair. In that context, I'm pleased to say that work will start next month on taking down ash trees that are affected by ash dieback. Some 40 ash trees will need to be removed across the park between now and the end of the year. New trees planted on the basis of one. There'll also be clearance of brambles and scrub on the southern slopes of the park, which should open up the magnificent views from the hilltop across to St Catherine's. Some 100 trees across St Giles Hill have already had dead wood removed to ensure public safety and improve the health of the trees. The new park plan itself, of course, covers a lot of other work that will need to be carried out in the coming years to protect and improve the park, and I hope we'll have a chance to discuss this in more detail at our next meeting, along with plans which are now advancing well to establish a Friends of St Giles Hill Park group, which would help maintain the park in the longer term. Finally, the play area at Abbey Gardens is now ready for safety surfacing to be laid and new play equipment installed. All the groundworks, including a new level path network, were completed on time, although slightly over budget due to the need to remove some older playground footings that have been left. A plan of the new playground was published last month. It reflects very closely what members of the public told us they wanted to see when we ran a consultation last year. I'm pleased to say that the new play area will be far more accessible to children and adults with varying abilities. At the moment, barring some extreme weather event, the new play area in Abbey Gardens is on track to open to the public in April. Finally, huge appreciation and thanks are due to the colleagues working in the natural environment and recreation team at the City Council for keeping all of these projects and many others across the wider district moving forwards in spite of escalating cost pressures and periodic staff shortages. Hats off to them. Chair.
Very good. Thank you, Councillor Radcliffe. I always enjoy your detailed and very progressive reports and look forward to us getting those into the minutes. Shared more broadly. Anybody else, perhaps? Councillor Edwards.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a brief update on one topic only from the city centre group, and that's the sometimes contentious issue of seating in the High Street. We reported back in September that all the city centre benches were going to be repaired or replaced as necessary this financial year, and I'd just like to say where we are on that and give some reassurance. The 7 contemporary style benches in the High Street have been removed and are being refurbished by the manufacturer, and they will be reinstalled in the same positions in March. The planters on top of security blocks have proved to have, strong views. People like them and some people don't. But the problem has been that they've been very costly to maintain. They've been subject to vandalism, and leakage of has faced the appearance. So a decision has been made that they are to be, the planters are to be removed from the top of the blocks. The ones nearest the Guildhall are gone, and the 2 small up by Jury Street done. And hardwood seat tops have been ordered and should be in place by the end of February. So the security blocks will be transformed to attractive seating. Notice that people already perch on the security blocks that don't have planters, so there's an obvious public demand for something more comfortable than bare concrete. The remaining city benches dotted around the periphery, if you like, of the High Street area, and a few other sites up the street. These are all going to be replaced with new benches of similar size that can be easily put into place on the mounting. And they too should be delivered in February and quickly. So it's it. Should go from April.
Very good. Thank you, Councillor. It was an important update there in terms of what's happening with seating. I understand the decision was taken to do it this time of year because it's the time when then there's less people looking to sit. So I think that's the reason it's being done now. But good to know that there's going to be seating from the end of February and then April.
Yeah, well, since there was no skating this year. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Councillor. And Councillor Tipper Cooper, please.
I'll keep it very brief, Chair, and just focus on a couple of updates since the last meeting. Just to update people on the Buttercross, this is from the Heritage Group. The Buttercross, a resurvey of the monument as requested by Historic England, along with structural engineering surveys, have been completed. People have noted the cherry picker having a good old look around the Buttercross quite recently. And the council are now in the process of preparing specifications for tender, complete with schedules and requisite supporting information based off the condition survey. The works are subject to weather, and the intention is undertaking the work in the summer of this year. So that'll be restoration work, keeping the Buttercross going for many more centuries, one hopes. On Hyde Abbey Gateway, a resurvey of that monument, as requested again by Historic England, along with further structural engineering surveys, have now been completed. And we're now in the process of preparing specifications for tender again for that. And that is also planned for summer 2020 this year, this summer, for the works to start. That's the repair works. And in terms of the public realm works around Hyde Abbey Gateway, that should be completed on a phased basis, subject to budgets and also involving the local heritage groups and the community in terms of engagement as to what it looks like around that site. That's 2 updates from the heritage.
Very good. Thank you, Councillor de Cooper. Very important updates there, certainly in terms of progress on the Buttercross. So thank you for your continued efforts there. With that, I think it draws us on to the last item, which is the forward work plan, and the one remaining meeting of the year, which will be on the 13th of March. Councillor Radcliffe already referred to the St Giles Hill Park Management Plan.